while we're waiting, giving everybody another moment or two to join, just so everybody knows, you are welcome to interact with me during the training. There's lots of ways to do that. You can unmute yourself and just interrupt me. Totally okay. You can throw something in the chat box. I've got the chat box open, so I usually try to keep an eye on that. Or you can interact with me through the reactions that you have on your Zoom screen. You can also raise your hand if you're embarrassed to interrupt me. You don't have to interrupt me. You can raise your hand. I'll see that. Or if I ask a question and you don't want to show your face or put something in the comments, you can just, do a thumbs up or thumbs down or, whatever you want to do there. So anyways, have fun interacting during the training. Today, we are covering writing offers and writing and getting your offers accepted, I think is what it's called. I can't see though, because you're actually over the, hold on, I'm changing slides because I'm clicking on it. Let's try this again. Start over. All right, yeah, getting your offers accepted. So that's the goal today. We are not covering the residential purchase agreement because that is a full training all on its own. I have done that in the past. We will do that in the future, but that's not today. So today we are talking about repeatable and highly effective techniques and strategies for helping you to write offers to get them accepted and the strategy around that, as well as we'll talk about the escrow process for our buyers as well. Hold on, there we go. All right, here is the pending path, right? So we put our buyers into contract. And then we have our inspections done, repairs, the lender requirements, any title issues. Then we work towards closing the transaction and move in. That's a highly simplified process there of what actually happens during it. So let's dive deeper into what that looks like. Last week we covered, working with buyers, the buyer consultation appointment, and setting them up to show properties. How to show properties, and then just kind of taking you through that time frame of always having the next appointment scheduled. The same thing happens once you get into contract. And just so you know, once we get into contract, like the first couple weeks are like super crazy busy. We're having inspections and appraisals, and the lender's asking for things, and they have to get the deposit, and like there's all these things that happen the first 2 weeks. And then oftentimes if our escrows are 30 days, those latter half, that last part of the 2 weeks or the 4 weeks, the last 2 weeks of the process, it moves a lot slower, and it's going to be important to make sure that you have scheduled interactions with your buyers during that time period, because oftentimes during those last 2 weeks, we're just waiting for the property to close at that point. So we're not interacting with them as much. So just make sure you have those planned interactions to touch base with them. It feels a little odd because you've been interacting with them to show properties. Oh my gosh, we're submitting offers. We're in contract, we got inspections, and all of a sudden it's like the property hasn't closed, but we're not interacting with them as much. So just kind of think through that process in your head, make some notes to make sure that you interact with your buyers through the entire purchase process. Our job as we look at this map of the pending path is to make the transaction as smooth and as stress-free as possible, right? That's what we all want for the home buying process. All right. The key areas. Okay, hold on. I'm just have to, you guys are, hold on just a second. I'm just rearranging windows because I'm having a hard time seeing and interacting with my screen that I didn't think I needed, and now I'm realizing I do. So hold on just a second. All right. Let's try that. I think we're good now. I still have the chat open. All right. So when we go into preparing to write the offer, we ended last week at step 7, where we are showing properties. When we finally find the property for our buyers that they want to write an offer on, buyer selects that property. They always are in charge of selecting that property. Buyers can write offers on multiple homes. Okay, it is possible. I don't recommend it. There's always a risk associated with that. So you always want to outline that risk to your buyers. It's mentioned in the market conditions advisory, I believe is the advisory in your Carforms library, where it addresses writing multiple offers. because there's always a risk. Ultimately, if you have contingencies in the offer, you should be able to, if you wrote two offers and they both got accepted at the same time, you should be able to cancel one based on the contingencies. But also in the residential purchase agreement, it talks about the fact that that we're writing this offer and our intention is that we're going to move forward with the purchase in good faith. Okay. And if our intention is to write multiple offers, and that our intention is that we're not going, if both got accepted, we are not moving forward with one in good faith. It's not, we're not actually canceling based on the contingencies. There's always a risk there that the sellers could go after your buyers for damages due to the fact that they did not act in good faith. So just kind of keep that in mind. Again, I think it's in the market conditions advisory that it addresses that issue, so that you can have that conversation with your buyers. But it's not illegal to write multiple offers on multiple homes. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. Anytime we're preparing to write the offer, we want to have a conversation with the listing agent. Okay. We want to know when they're reviewing offers. We want to know if they have any other offers in hand. If there's anything that should stay with the property or should not stay with the property. If there's anything that would make the transition easier for the sellers as they move into their next chapter of life that we can do, that we can include in that offer. So we're just going to have those conversations with those listing agents. Please don't do it via text. Please actually pick up the phone and talk to the listing agent and ask them what you should know before writing an offer. Especially when we go into like a multiple offer situation, it helps to know what the sellers are looking for and what the listing agent's looking for in an offer, so that ultimately you can look out for the best interests of your buyers. But if there's things that you can do to tweak that offer to make it more appealing for the sellers so that they accept your offer over somebody else's, then we want to try to do that. You want to prepare a CMA. Okay, I usually don't do a full CMA for my buyers, but I am going to pull up that interactive map on my MLS system. I'm going to pull up comps for the area, and I'm going to make a recommendation as to whether I think it's priced appropriately, whether I think it's priced a little high, a little low, are they getting multiple offers? How high do you think we could go? Right. So we're going to disseminate that information with the MLS. And then we're going to communicate with our clients. We're going to come back to our clients and ask them what their desires are for the property, for their offer, how they want to write it up, what kind of listing price what kind of offer price they're thinking, whether they're going to have inspections, if they have a loan, all those details. We want to make sure that we communicate with our clients to fully understand what their wishes and desires are. And then on the flip side of that, we're also going to let them know about our conversation with the listing agent as to when they're reviewing offers. We're going to talk with them about what we found out as far as running that CMA report, where we think the value of that property lies. And then we're going to talk with them about any terms that we may want to tweak that would make it a friendlier offer for the sellers to accept. Okay. We also may want to have a conversation with our clients about what is customary in our area. And what do I mean by that? Like, let's take title and escrow fees, for instance. In Solano County, it's customary that the buyer pays title and escrow fees and the seller pays the transfer tax. In the Sacramento area, some of those fees get split. So what's customary for our area are where that offer is being written, so that your buyers understand what might be perceived as customary by a seller as well. Because our goal with writing an offer is we don't want it to be countered. Okay, we want the sellers just to accept it as written is our goal. Okay, anytime there's a counter offer opens in play, it opens it up for somebody else to swoop in and steal that property from our buyers, and we don't want that to happen. Any questions about that? All right. The key areas of the offer, right? So in addition to price and days for close of escrow, those are kind of the two given, right? What are we going to offer and how long is it going to take for it to close escrow? The following things come into play. We've got our loan terms. Is it going to be an FHA loan, a VA loan, or is it a conventional loan? And then what comes into play with those as well? Okay. How much is the good faith deposit going to be? Remember, we have to have a good faith deposit in order to have a valid offer. Okay, that's called consideration. So we have to have that good faith deposit. Typically in our area, that runs about 1% of the purchase price. So if we're offering 550,000, usually that deposit's going to be either like 5,000 or 6,000. We usually round up. We don't usually make it random numbers like 5,500. Okay. You could. The contingencies, right? There's 8 contingencies as part of our residential purchase agreement. We have our loan, our appraisal, our inspections, our reviewed of lease and lien items, our preliminary title report, our seller disclosures. And there's something else that I'm not coming up with right now. There's 2 others in addition. So just know that there's 8 contingencies out there. Usually we kind of think of it as the big 3. And that's because I'm old school, and that was before the contract broke it out into 8. We used to just have like 3 contingencies. Everything kind of fell underneath that investigation contingency. So usually that's kind of how I think about it. Like, how long do we need for the loan contingency? We always want to have a conversation with our lender about that. Like, how fast do they think they can get the appraisal back? How fast they can get it through underwriting? Keep in mind that the file doesn't have to be like all the way through the loan process and docs at title to remove that loan contingency, but we want it to go through that first stage of underwriting so that we know what kind of conditions the lender is going to kick back to us to make sure that our buyer can meet those conditions. We also want to see how fast do they get the appraisal ordered? How long do they think that's going to take so that we can specify that appraisal contingency? And then it comes up to us as to what inspections do the buyers think they want to have? And how fast do you think we can get those scheduled and get those inspections completed? Oftentimes I have my inspection and seller disclosures, at least in lien item, preliminary title report. HOA is one of the other ones. I have those all kind of match each other. Okay. So usually that's about L3 through L7 on the residential purchase contract grid. L1 and L2 is the loan and appraisal, and then L3 and below, I usually have all those contingencies matched to the same time frame. If I shorten that investigation contingency to 10 days, I shorten all the others to 10 days. It just makes it easier. It also looks prettier. So contingencies, right? Other key areas of the offer are repairs. If we know we're going into it with like a VA offer or an FHA offer, or there's something going into it that the buyers are like, oh my gosh, the fence was falling over, and having that fence repaired is going to be a deal breaker for me. Include those up front. Okay, don't put our buyers into contract on a property where they know they're going to want something repaired specifically that they saw when they walked through the property, and then have them spend money on appraisal and inspections, and then be like, oh yeah, well, they're going to repair that fence, right? Well, no, we haven't asked for that yet. So now we asked for the fence to be repaired, and the seller's like, no, we're not fixing the fence. Like, you guys saw that, right? Now we've got a deal breaker, and my buyers are going to want to walk after they've spent all this money. So if there's something that your buyer saw as they walked through that property, or something that you know is going to need to get taken care of, we want to ask for that up front. One of the major things too, just to keep in mind with like FHA and VA, conventional loans, we don't often have contingencies that come back as part of the appraisal. With our FHA and our VA loans, the livability of the property is important. So safety hazards. And one of the main things that we see on there were homes built before 1978 that have chipping and peeling paints. The FHA appraiser is going to call that as a subject to, is what we call that, where the appraisal gets done, and it's subject to. It means, hey, we've got value, but it's subject to the following repairs. And one of the main ones that we see there is when we've got chipped and peeling paint, especially on the outside of the house, the eaves, the garage door, whatever it might be on a house that was built before 1978, they're going to call that to be repaired. Okay, they're going to ask for the chipped paint to be scraped and it to be repainted. And the reason for that on a house built before 1978 is that there's that risk of it being lead-based paint. Okay, that's a safety hazard, and the FHA does not like health and safety hazards. So that's one of the main things that we get called on. VAs, kind of hit and miss on different things, and we don't see a whole lot anymore. And now with the VA requiring the Form 33 instead of a full pest inspection clearance, we don't run into the stack of repairs and the costs associated with that as we used to. Back in the day, the VA used to require a clear pest inspection to be done, which meant that all the dry rot had to be taken care of. So oftentimes we would write the offer and pre-negotiate like an amount to be covered for the pest repairs. But we don't have to do that anymore for the most part. The other thing that comes into play when writing an offer are going to be your fees. Who's going to pay what, right? That's who's going to pay those customary fees, title and escrow, your transfer taxes, the city transfer tax, if there is some. You've got your home warranty that needs to get paid. If it's in an HOA, you've got your HOA transfer fees. So you've got all those different things that you've got to use as negotiating points. All right, the bonus areas of the offer. So these are sometimes what may come into play. As previously mentioned, the seller's needs, right? Have a conversation with that listing agent to find out what the seller's needs are to see if you can accommodate those. Ultimately, your job is to represent your buyer and look out for the best interest of your buyer. You don't ultimately care what the seller wants or needs, except in the fact that it's going to help you get your offer accepted. Okay, does the seller need a rent back, right? Are they going to stay in the property after the close of escrow? Are you going to offer that to them for free as part of negotiating tactics? Are you going to charge them for that? I know a lot of you have only been in the market long enough to experience the highs that we had over the past few years or the lull that we're in right now, which is kind of a weird market. But during the highs where it's a seller's market and you're getting multiple offers, people give that seller rent back for free. Okay, once it kind of balances out or you got a buyer's market, what's customary for seller rent back is the buyer's PITI. That'd be the buyer's principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So what is their payment going to be? Once you close escrow, you're going to divide that by 30 and then multiply it by the number of days that seller needs the rent back. That's what usually a seller would pay in a slower market for the ability to be able to stay in that property. They're going to cover the buyer's payment for the time that they're in there. Okay, are you going to offer an appraisal guarantee? We talked about that yesterday on the with the counter offers when we did our car forms training. Right on the appraisal line, I think it's L2 of the contract. You have the ability to say, hey, this property is contingent on the property appraising for contract price or blank. You could put in an appraisal guarantee lower than that, which means that the buyers are going to come in with the difference if the property appraises for less. So in our example yesterday, I said the house we were offering 500,000. We may come in with like a 490,000 appraisal guarantee, saying that our buyers are willing to cover the difference of that $10,000. Now keep in mind that the buyers have to cover the difference of that $10,000 if you write it in there. The appraisal contingency is now based on the appraisal coming in at 490,000, not 500,000, which means that if it comes in at 492,000, your buyers are still required to purchase that house. They can't cancel based on that appraisal contingency. You may put in an escalation clause into your offer, right? These are all tactics to help you get your offers accepted if it's a competitive market. An escalation clause would be like you saying, my buyer's willing to pay $3,000 over the highest offer if a higher offer is received. I usually put in there with proof of highest offer, right? Now, keep in mind, oftentimes, if you're going to throw in an escalation clause, you may want to cap it. So, hey, buyer to pay, $3,000 over highest offer up to $530,000 with proof of highest offer. So a lot of times we want to cap that so it's not just like a free for all. And then number two, we always ask for proof of the other highest offer so that we can guarantee it. And then number three, keep in mind that oftentimes the seller is going to counter you higher than what you've offered because you've already showed your cards that you're willing to go higher. Okay, it's not a bad thing necessarily, especially if your buyer really wants that house. You may want to negotiate buyer credits, right? Are we getting buyer credits for a closing cost? Are we asking for credits to cover the difference of a commission deficiency based on our BRBC, right? What does that look like? Does your buyer need some closing cost credits, or does your buyer want credits for potential repairs? And then we also want to make sure that we put in there any specific offer review date or preemptive offers, right? If they're like, oh, we're not reviewing offers until next Monday, there's no preemptive offers. If we're going to submit that offer now, we want to make sure to put a deadline or an expiration on that offer to make sure that it meets with when that offer is going to be reviewed. Any questions so far? All right. Generally speaking, when we submit an offer on a property, we're going to get price or terms, but we're rarely going to get both. Okay. So it's important to know to our buyer what's the most important thing. Is it more important that they get a lower price? Or is it more important that they get a credit for their closing costs or repairs, right? We want to know what's the most important to our buyers. We're going to write an offer in the way that benefits our buyer, both price and terms. And we still want to know how to negotiate on counter offers, or if the listing agent calls us, like where we're willing to give. And then there might be those counter offers or multiple counter offers, which we covered yesterday, right? When we submit an offer to a seller, the seller has the right to either reject that offer, accept the offer, or counter the offer. And if they received multiple offers, they might do a multiple counter offer versus a regular seller counter offer. Okay, generally speaking, we make an offer to a seller. The ball is now in the seller's court. If they sign it as accepted, we are officially in contract. If they counter us, they've now taken and made us an offer. So then it becomes our ball, and we have the ability, once they make a counter offer, to either accept the counter offer, reject the counter offer, or to counter that counter offer. So we have the same options. Okay, if it's a regular counter offer to us and we accept it, we're officially in contract at that time. If it's a multiple counter offer, then it doesn't officially go into contract. We send that back, and then the seller gets to decide which multiple counter offer they're going to go with. And then once they sign the counter offer a second time, if it's ours, then that puts us in the contract. If we counter offer their counter, okay, if we make a counter offer to any of their counters, now again, we've taken the ball and we've hit it back to them. The ball is now in their court. They can either accept, reject, or counter that counter offer. Okay, they have the same options there. Keep in mind too that anytime when we're in here playing ball, countering offers, we don't have an accepted offer yet, that becomes an opportunity for somebody else to swoop in and steal that house. Okay, anytime in here, if the seller gets a better offer, they can start negotiating with another buyer. They can accept another offer. They can withdraw our counter offers. Okay, the buyers also have the ability to withdraw the offer if they decide they don't want to move forward. Okay. The buyer cover letter, I usually do this with a email. So we used to include like buyer letters with our offers. That's highly frowned upon now due to the Fair Housing Act, where that could be seen as an opportunity for discrimination. Oftentimes in those buyer letters, we send a picture of the buyers. We include whatever our buyers want to include, but we send a picture of the buyers oftentimes, or describe their family setup, right? So it gives the opportunity for discrimination. So that's why we don't recommend buyer letters anymore. And also in our listing agreement now, the default is that the listing agent will not submit buyer letters. But that doesn't prevent you from providing a cover letter for your offer. Again, usually I'm emailing over the offer, and so I'm going to put in that email a body, which would be the cover letter. And it would just be, talking with them about, hey, my buyers really loved that property. We're submitting an offer, and then we're going to summarize the details of that offer. Right? What's the offer price, close the escrow? How are we meeting the seller's needs? What are the buyers asking for? I usually like to summarize that in the email. Okay. Tips for communicating with the listing agent. Okay. Back in the days before we had like buyer brokerage, it was customary for the selling agent to present the buyer's offer directly to the seller with the listing agent in attendance, with all agents in attendance, and oftentimes all clients in attendance. Not only that, but it was expected the selling agent or the buyer's agent would provide the seller with a net sheet or an estimate of closing costs as part of the presentation. In those days, we called the listing agent to arrange the appointment, and then we met them at the seller's home, but times have changed, right? But do keep in mind that if the buyer wants to present the offer directly to the property owner, they do have the right to do that. Okay. We want to make sure that we call the listing agent to let them know that we're going to submit an offer. Remember, I talked about that already. We're going to ask them questions about the property. Do they have other offers? When are they reviewing those? What would make this transition best for the seller? Is there anything that we need to know before we write up this offer, right? Once I send the email over with that summary, right, that kind of intro letter to my buyers and the offer, I'm going to email it over to the listing agent. Then I'm going to text them so that I can confirm that they received my offer. Okay. Also, make sure that you check the MLS for instructions of how to submit the offer, because if they've asked us to submit it on Glide or HomeLight Listing Management or send it to a different email, we want to make sure that we send it to the right place. Our goal here is to not annoy the listing agent because we want them to want to work with us. So we want to follow their instructions. Okay, if we're uploading it to one of those systems, I may just send over a text message of, hey, Tracy, just a heads up, I just uploaded an offer into HomeLight Listing Management. If something happened and you don't receive it, please let me know, right? I'm just going to give them a heads up so that they know they got that offer. Okay, sometimes in the MLS, it specifies that they want you to CC or include or send it to their assistant or a transaction coordinator. Okay. The key is communication when it comes to the other agent. You can't over communicate. Okay, you can over phone call, so be careful with that. You don't want to annoy the listing agent with phone calls, but usually a listing agent's happy to answer text messages as well. So make those couple initial phone calls. And then if you have any additional questions or, hey, can you clarify what the seller's names are? It's not clear on tax records, like shoot over a text message. They will appreciate it if that offer comes through complete and ready to go and that you're actually communicating with them rather than being like secret agent and like they haven't ever talked to you and then all of a sudden this offer appears in their inbox and there's no follow-up call or text or anything and they know nothing about you or your buyers. They don't prefer that. Handling difficult agents. Okay. Many agents sabotage negotiations by engaging in a war of egos with a difficult agent on the other side of the transaction. So just remember that you're representing your buyer and you're trying to make your buyer's dreams come true, even if that agent is difficult to work with. Okay, right? And always keep your behavior in check, right? Is my behavior in my client's best interest? And what do I have to do or say in order to be successful on my client's behalf? That's the goal. Sometimes, in spite of your best efforts, the agent on the other side of the transaction is still going to make it difficult to be effective on behalf of your clients. They may display, behaviors such as like being rude or aloof. Sometimes it's hard to even get them to like answer or respond to a phone call or a text message, right? Non-communicative. They may be bullying, criticizing, belligerent, condescending, dishonest. We've all encountered them. Don't be those agents. What can you do if you run into one of these agents? First, just take a deep breath, right? Each time bad behavior is displayed, just breathe deeply. Know that you're going to get through it and that you need to stay calm. Our first response is probably going to be psychological, right? So if you recognize what is happening in your body, like your heart rate starts increasing, you become short of breath, your blood pressure, you can feel it rising, right? You just want to reach through the phone and strangle the other agent. You may need to take immediate steps like, hey, can I call you back? Right? It's okay to be like, can I call you back in a couple moments? Something just happened or, whatever it might be, so that you can calm down before continuing that conversation. You may need to just take a few minutes, just like close your eyes, take a deep breath so that you can respond to whatever it is that you're saying. Whatever you do, you don't want your response to match what the other agent is doing to you. Okay. You can use the IVEC method which is where I think it covers it on the next slide. We investigate, validate, educate, and close. So we can use the IVEC method when talking with the other agents. So in an interaction, maybe where they're making a rude comment of, oh, well, you obviously haven't been in the business very long, right? You could come back and investigate like, oh, why is that important? Or why are you saying that it's obvious I haven't been in the business very long, right? So you can always ask for clarification. Oh, can you show me how you would have liked to have that done? You know, whatever it is, like just continue to ask questions to stay in control of the conversation. Right? Do I want to be right, or do I want to get this property for my clients? That's what you want to keep in mind. Okay. Here's an example. Sometimes on the slides, there's examples. Let's see. Here's an example. The bad behavior agent responds with, you haven't been in the business very long, have you? They're kind of rude and condescending. You can respond with, it sounds like I may have missed something in the offer. Did I? Right? We're just investigating what's coming on. Why are they saying this? What's the underlying issue? They're going to respond with, oh, you sure did. Not only did you leave out, you know, that my sellers needed a rent back, you also emailed me it and I asked you to upload it over to HomeLight Listing Management, right? So whatever that would be. Oh, okay. How about if we go over the offer together? And I know that you said your buyers needed a rent back. However, I actually submitted this offer purposefully, not including that, because my buyers have actually been kicked out of their current home and they're living in a hotel room. So they can't continue to live in that hotel room for another 60 days. So we purposely wrote it without the seller rent back. And I know that's going to be an inconvenience to your seller. However, that's what my buyers need in this situation. And I understand if that's not going to work, right? So whatever that is, like clarify. You could respond, right? Let's see here. Oh, and then the other one might be like, right, they might respond after you clarify, oh, okay, I'm sorry I offended you. I just get so frustrated with agents that didn't fill out the agreement properly or didn't do what I asked, right? No problem. I understand. I want to do what's right for both of our clients and make this a win-win. Let me see how we can make that happen, right? So we can diffuse the situation. We're going to take that shield and take it down. Does that make sense to everybody? There's lots of difficult agents out there. I promise you will interact with them. Handling difficult buyers. Not only do we have difficult agents, we have difficult buyers. We have an agent this last week that was actually threatened by the buyer's significant other. Super fun situation. So it happens. Our buyers sometimes get unruly. If it's before you've entered into contract on a property, know that you can fire your buyers just like they can fire you. You can terminate the relationship with your buyers. So don't work with people that are abusive emotionally to you. You can choose to move on. Never talk a buyer into a home, right? So when we have a buyer and we get in the contract on a property, they're talking about, you know, canceling, they're getting cold feet, they're getting wishy-washy, you know, this is a good property for them. Never talk them into the home. You want to determine whether they're operating out of fear or whether it's a legitimate objection. Okay, we want to differentiate those. We can use, again, that IVEC method, the investigate, validate, educate, and close method with our buyers as well. Okay, if they're like, oh my gosh, I just think we should cancel, like investigate. Why are you thinking that now's a good time to cancel? What's making you nervous? Are they operating out of fear? Do they have a legitimate concern? We want to validate that. So we want to reiterate like, oh yeah, I can see how that might make you nervous, especially since you've never owned a home before. Absolutely. Then we want to move into the education portion of, well, I know that the home inspector said that the water heater was past its prime. However, he also said that it's still functioning really well. And in addition, we're going to include a home warranty. You're going to get a home warranty as part of the purchase process, which means that if something happens in that home warranty or that hot water heater does stop working, it's a $75 or an $80, you know, service fee. They're going to come out and they're going to try to fix it. If they can't fix it, they'll replace it for you. Sometimes it doesn't cover the replacement 100%, but it's going to cover the biggest portion of it. Does that put your mind at ease? That you're going to have that in place for all major systems in your house. Oh my gosh, I didn't even know we got that, right? So you've investigated, validated, you've educated, and now closed. Do you feel comfortable now moving forward with this house? Or, hey, well, we could always ask for that as part of a repair request, right? If it's a deal breaker, something that's making them want to cancel. So always remember that IVEC method: investigate, validate, educate, and close. All right, when we present the offer, we want to make sure that we include all related documents. So we're going to include that proof of funds, right? Showing they have funds for the down payment and the close of escrow, or down payment and closing costs. If you don't know what the closing costs are, they usually amount to 2 to 3% of the purchase price. So if they're putting down 20% or 10% on a $500,000 purchase, they're going to need 2% of 500,000 is going to be 10,000 plus the 10% down payment, which is 50,000. So they're going to need to be able to show that they have an account someplace, $60,000. Okay. We want to include our lender letter or a pre-approval letter. We want to make sure that we include, obviously, the offer, including any amendments or addendums. And then it says their buyer letters. But again, unless the buyer's like, oh my gosh, I heard that this is a really good practice, I'd like to submit it. I never tell them no. Okay, again, I don't encourage it because it could be basis for discrimination. However, I never tell them that they can't. In person is less common, but highly effective if possible. Again, I've never actually presented an offer in person, but it is an option of something that you can do. You want to make sure that you check the MLS for instructions. Are you sending it over via email or electronic format? The one thing that I never do is I never send that offer out to my buyers for signature and then CC the listing agent on that signing folder through DocuSign or Authentisign. I want to send it directly from me. So I'm going to wait until everybody signs it. I get the PDF copies, and then I'm going to send over that PDF copy with that cover letter. And then again, I'm going to alert the listing agent and make sure that they confirm receipt of our offer. I don't want it to get lost in their emails. Once we've entered into contract, right? Once we've negotiated the contract, then we move into the pending path. Again, we go into inspections, repairs, lender requirements, title issues, close transaction, and they get to move in. Our offer gets accepted. We are going to step 9, open escrow. Okay. We're going to make sure that we get copies of our offer to everyone involved. That's going to be title and escrow, your transaction coordinator, the other agent or broker, your client, and the lender. Okay. Title, escrow, and the lender are going to need copies of just the residential purchase agreement and any counter offers or any amendments or addendums. Okay, your client's going to get a copy of everything they've signed. Your transaction coordinator is going to get a copy of everything that has been part of the transaction that has been signed by your clients. And the other agent and broker is going to get copies of everything except your BRBC, your buyer representation and broker compensation. Now, keep in mind too, that if there is a shortfall in the commission you negotiated on your BRBC versus what's being offered by the listing agent, so your client's paying part of your commission, title and escrow and the lender also need a copy of the BRBC, and you need to make them aware that the buyer's coming in with funds to pay your commission. Okay, this is going to become more and more common, I think, as time moves forward. Your earnest money deposit is your next. You're going to advise your buyer to get their deposit into escrow, and you're going to get them the means at which they can do that. They can take a check by the escrow company. They can wire the funds. Always advise the buyer prior to wiring to verify wiring instructions prior to sending the EMD. They want to call the title company, actually verify the instructions that they've received. And you're going to get a copy of that preliminary title report from the title and escrow company. In Northern California, title and escrow is the same company. It makes it really convenient and less expensive. In Southern California, just so you know, in case you ever get asked to open escrow down in Southern California, with a Southern California title company, oftentimes the title and escrow are 2 separate companies, and it's usually more expensive.
Hey, Amy, I have a little question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So backing up a little bit about the BRBC, And in terms of moving forward to submitting an offer, so what a scenario that might be coming up for me is that it would be that the buyer would need to compensate me for a portion of um, the commission.
Uh-huh.
Now you're saying on the purchase agreement, it is a box that we need to check stating that we have assigned BRBC and then send that to who?
No, so the purchase, you don't have to include it on the purchase agreement. So it doesn't get checked on the purchase agreement if the buyer's going to cover the difference. There is a box on the residential purchase agreement in case you're going to try to negotiate that missing commission with the seller directly. But other than that, it doesn't need to be included on the purchase agreement, but the lender and the title company are going to need a copy of your BRBC just to be made aware that the buyers are coming to close with additional funds.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so then on the purchase agreement, in terms of like the listing side, they don't have, I mean, I'm assuming they need to be aware, but there's nothing that we need to put on the RPA?
They don't even need to be made aware.
Okay.
That's between you and your client, so it doesn't really pertain to the listing agent or the seller at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. All right, step 9B is investigation. This is where you're going to review the seller disclosures. You should get a copy of the seller property questionnaire, the transfer disclosure statement, or the exempt seller questionnaire, ESD, exempt seller questionnaire. You're going to do your agent visual inspection, which is your visual inspection of the property. That should be done as close to entering into escrow as possible. I usually recommend within the first 24 hours. You're going to get a copy of the listing agent avid. I skipped a couple bullet points up there under seller disclosures. You got the seller property questionnaire, the transfer disclosure statement, the listing agent avid or agent visual inspection disclosure, and then copies of any leased or liened items. If it's in an HOA, you're also going to get the HOA disclosures. You're going to do your agent visual inspection. You're also going to get a copy of the natural hazard zone disclosure. You're going to do your inspections and investigation of the property. And those are not the same thing. Inspections would be, right? We have inspectors that come out, a home inspector, a pest inspector, a roof inspector. And then we have where you can do more investigation. They can go take measurements. They can spend time in the neighborhood. They can look inside closets, right? They can do all the investigation of the property that they desire. On inspections, we usually recommend that our buyers do. There's 5 inspections that I usually kind of blanket recommend, which are going to be your home inspection, your pest inspection, your roof inspection, your sewer lateral inspection. Let's see, we have home, pest, roof, sewer. Which one am I missing? Oh, HVAC. HVAC. Most houses have a home, most have a roof. Most have an HVAC system and most have a sewer system. So that's why we have those. And then you've got your pest inspection. Those are usually the ones that we blanket recommend. If there's a pool, we may want to recommend that they have a pool inspection done. If there's solar, we may want to recommend that they have the solar inspected to make sure it's functioning properly, right? So we're going to take it on a case-by-case basis, house by house, but those 5 are usually the ones that get recommended on just about every property. Okay, we're going to complete those inspections during our investigation period. At the same time, step 9C, right? We're opening escrow, we're doing inspections, and then the lender's also starting their process all at the same time. They're going to send out their initial disclosures to our buyers for review and to sign off on. Then they're going to submit the file to underwriting. They're going to order that appraisal. It is the lender that orders the appraisal. Once that file's gone through underwriting, they're going to spit out what we call conditions, which is, hey, they reviewed your income statement and now we need an explanation for the change in wages, or we reviewed the bank statements and we need an explanation for the large deposits, right? We're going to make sure that we're in contact with that lender and getting regular updates from that lender about where that file is at in the process, whether the appraisal's ordered, when it's due back, when they expect to have it out of underwriting. If there's documents that they need from your buyers that they're not having any luck getting the buyers to turn in, so that you can start hounding the buyers as well. So stay in communication with the lender during the escrow process. All right, step 9D is we're going to wrap up escrow. We're going to negotiate any repairs. We're going to send any final conditions over to the lender. If we need to negotiate extensions of time based on, how that file's rolling along, we would do that. We're going to make sure that we remove any contingencies. Once we remove those contingencies, that's a good time for your buyer to give notice to their landlord. I highly recommend that your buyers don't give notice to their landlord until they've removed all the contingencies and they're like, this is the property for me. Okay, and just remember that we want to communicate, and communicate some more. Okay, with the listing agent, with our buyers, with the lender, with title and escrow. We want to be in constant communication with them at all times. Step 11 is what I call finalizing the transaction, or the final 5 days. Usually about this time is where you get the clear to close from the lender. They issue what's called a CD, or the closing disclosure, that gets signed off by your buyers. Once the CD is signed off, there's a 3-day wait for the close of escrow. We can't sign the final documents for 3 days. Okay, this is why it's called the final 5 days. Once that CD's been issued and signed off, that's a good time to go ahead and schedule the signing with the escrow company. You want to make sure to review the closing statement for your buyer. You want to make sure that any credits that were negotiated are on there, that the home warranty is on there, that the home warranty has been ordered, all of those things. That's also a good time for your buyers to go ahead and start scheduling utility appointments to get their utilities turned on. So we want to communicate that to our buyers. Buyers need to wire their closing funds to the title company or bring in a cashier's check. They should do that before the scheduled close of escrow date. Okay, those funds should be in escrow probably about 3 days prior to the scheduled close of escrow date. And then we're going to do our final verification of property condition. The contract defaults to 5 days prior to the close of transaction. I usually recommend you put 1 to 5 days on the residential purchase agreement, and that just gives you a time span in order to do that. And you just want to verify that any repairs that were negotiated were completed and that the property is still in the same condition as when the offer was accepted. Then we're going to move through the close of escrow. So once the final documents are sent to title and they're signed, buyer is going to wire those funds. Again, that should probably be wired about 3 days prior to the scheduled close of escrow. Lender is going to review all the documents that were signed by the buyers. They're going to do a final credit check, which is why it's important for our buyers not to go and finance their appliances before the close of escrow. They're going to do a final verification of employment to make sure they are still employed. And then once the lender is satisfied, they're going to wire the loan funds to the escrow company. So now escrow has all the funds available that they need in order to close money, the closing costs from the buyer, the funds from the lender. We're ready to go. Keep in mind too that when my buyers wire funds to title, I usually recommend that they round up. So if it's like they need $11,256.27, I usually recommend that they send like $11,500 or $12,000. They're going to get the excess back, but it just makes sure if there's any hiccups at the end that it's covered. Once the escrow has all the funds from the lender and the buyer, and they get the clear from the lender, they're going to do what's called releasing the file to record. They're going to send it to the county assessor's office to be recorded, the county recorder's office to record. Once you're on record, that's when it's officially closed. And that's when your buyers get keys. Make sure to follow up with your post-close follow-up process. Send out thank you cards to all parties that were involved in that transaction, the listing agent, title and escrow, your lender. Make sure you thank everybody for a job well done. And then that's when buyer is going to take possession of the home. So you want to make sure that you make arrangement for keys, garage door openers, remotes. Your buyer's depending on you to make sure that they can move in. So I always double check with the listing agent before the close of escrow of where I'm going to find the extra keys and remotes, and let them know that I'm going to pull the key out of the lockbox, and I'll let them know once I've done so. Any questions? Step 14, your post-close plan, creating clients for life, right? Create a post-close follow-up system. You want to make sure that you update their address in your CRM or your database. You want to make sure that you send them home warranty information. So if they have any problems, they know who to call. Follow up if you're going to send them a closing gift. make sure that you check in with them on regular intervals, ask them for referrals, ask them for reviews. And then I usually recommend every January that you send copies of your closing statements from all your closings the past year to your clients, because they're going to need those for their taxes. And then you want to add them to that 36 to convert plan and start all over with that. Any questions, thoughts, ahas? Was this helpful? Oh, I got a thumbs up from Bree.
Amy, I got a quick question
Yes.
on if the buyer has to pay additional commissions,
Yeah.
is that written into the RPA? Because what I'm really questioning is what if the buyer wants to finance that in their loan?
They're not going to be able to finance that in their loan. And it won't be in the RPA. If the buyer's paying a deficiency in the commission, we're utilizing the BRBC to be able to show the lender that the buyer has agreed to pay the difference. But the only way they could, there's no way to finance it as part of the loan. Just like there's really no way to finance closing costs. The only way that the buyer could do that is by increasing the interest rate on their loan, which would cause them to get a rebate from the lender in order to pay their closing costs. At which point, having the BRBC in place and the lender having a copy of that, those funds that they get back as a rebate from the lender could help to cover that. But there's no actual way for the buyer to finance the commission deficiency.
So that would be an addition, always an additional cash expense to the buyer.
It would be.
Okay.
Yep.
Amy, I do have a question on that as well. So since that's an additional cost to the buyer, and I have heard it explained as when you go to balance, it would be on the buyer's expense sheet on their side so they can clearly see it, so it's stated. But would it need to be in an addendum, like to the BRBC or to the purchase? Like, how would it be handled?
Yeah, so it doesn't need to be there doesn't need to be any documents in addition to that BRBC. The BRBC clearly states that I've agreed to pay Amanda X commission for helping me find a house. Further down in the BRBC, it talks about the fact that if there's any commission received from any other parties in the transaction, that it reduces the amount that the buyer is obligated to come in with. And so you may want to provide a copy of like the MLS report where it shows what the commission's being offered from the cooperating broker compensation from the MLS so that they can do their own math. You also are going to have, I highly recommend using the ABCD form, the anticipated broker compensation disclosure, when you go to submit the offer, which states that, hey, we're submitting an offer on this property. This is the commission being offered, so that the buyer's made aware of it ahead of time. So you could always utilize that form in conjunction with the BRBC as well to show that here's what's being offered by third parties and here's what the buyer's responsible for.
Okay, and then since everything is negotiable, would I be able to, like, the buyer's side, negotiate down as a, a favor or whatever it may be in terms of how that transaction is going? Because that can be changed, right?
Yep, you would use the modification of term
MT
form that we covered yesterday, the MT form, and you would just reduce the commission due from X to Y.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarification.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that BRBC helped because when I did one in December, the buyers noticed that the commission that the listing agent was 2%, and they wanted me to make sure that I got my full commission. So they made sure I sent everything so I can get my extra 0.5%, which was really nice of them.
Yeah. So see, if you do your job and identify your value, then people see that and they want to make sure that you get paid. And keep in mind too that we don't set the commissions that you're required to charge a buyer or that you're willing to accept. That's between you and your buyers. You have the freedom to do that as part of Realty One Group. There's no set commissions. Any other questions or thoughts before we finish up for today? All right. right.
Perfect timing, Amy. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Make sure you log your attendance. It's in the chat box. You can grab that link and log it, and you can also make any suggestions for trainings that you'd like to see in the future. So we make sure to get them on our next schedule. All right. Thanks everyone for joining today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a great day, everybody.
All right. You guys too.